Welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality. It may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
Hello, everybody. This is the Natasha Helfer Podcast. I am your host. I'm super excited today to have a special guest. Her name is Dr. Betty Martin, and she is the author of a book called The Art of Receiving and Giving, The Wheel of Consent. And I've been hearing more and more about this book and also kind of the concepts of it. And I think it's super, super pertinent to, well, everybody, but in particular, my audience.
Pretty much everybody.
Yeah, pretty much everybody. So just a little bit about your bio that I just want to dive into conversation. But Betty has had her hands, this is from your bio. I love how you phrase this. So she's had her hands on people professionally for over 40 years, first as a chiropractor, and upon retiring from that practice as a certified surrogate partner, sacred, intimate, and somatic sex educator. So her explorations in somatic-based therapy and practices informed her creation of the framework, the Wheel of Consent. And as part of her work with the School of Consent, which I'm guessing you founded as part of your training, Betty travels around the world teaching practitioners how to create empowered agreements in their client sessions. She originally developed these trainings to teach much needed consent skills to sex workers and touch providers. These trainings are now attended by somatic therapists, massage therapists, sexuality educators, medical and healthcare workers, activists, human resource folks, and the spectrum of touch-based professional providers, all of whom complete the training with a clear understanding of how consent starts with our own bodies and then expands outwards into all forms of human relating with or without touch. Welcome, Betty. I'm so excited.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I guess I would love to start. I mean, I want to spend the bulk of our session in what I'm going to call chapter 14 of your book, which is the Wheel of Consent kind of explanation. But before we even get there, I'd love to hear a little bit more just about you, whatever you're comfortable sharing personally or professionally.
Yeah.
How did you get here to be the Wheel of Consent person?
That's a really great question. Well, I grew up in the Methodist Church. Later, young adulthood, I became a Baha'i, member of the Baha'i faith.
Okay.
And in my mid-40s, and became a chiropractor in there. In my mid-40s, after divorce, I thought, there's something to this sex thing that's more than I thought. And I went to a couple of workshops with the Body Electric School for women around sexuality. And what I came out of there with was this huge aha, which is that my eros belongs to me. And it was such an aha. I thought, well, what did I think it was before? And I realized that as a girl growing up in the 1950s and 60s, that my view of my own sexuality was that it always belonged to somebody, my partner, husband, or whoever. And it was always supposed to be in response to somebody else. What is considered sexy? Someone else is supposed to decide that, and I'm supposed to live it. Who wants to do what? I was always supposed to be in response to somebody. And I discovered that, oh, wait a minute, my eros lives in me. And I can bring it out to play with whoever and however I choose. And that was a huge aha. And I spent a few years exploring with a few friends, using a touch and massage and breath and movement and in in exploring what is eros anyway, and what's it feel like in my body, and what's my body capable of, and what are the feelings that arise when I'm trying this, what are the feelings that arise when I'm trying this, and just like what is it in me that is eros. It was a very fruitful few years, as you might imagine. And after some years of that, I came out of it realizing that I want to share with others what I have gained in my own awareness and self-empowerment. And so about that time, I was retiring from my chiropractic practice in a small town. And I moved into the city, into Seattle, and hung out a new shingle doing sex coaching, sacred intimate work, somatic sex coaching. And that means supporting people experientially through where they get stuck sexually and erotically, where they get confused, where they get scared, where they have feelings that they don't know how to manage, and how to communicate with each other, and how to be more comfortable in their skin. And as I started to do that, I discovered, oh my gosh, a lot of people are not very comfortable in their skin. So my work was somatic, meaning it was based on experience through movement, touch, breath, a lot of massage kinds of things, experiential games, so that you could experience in your body what it felt like to know that you have a choice, to make a choice, to know what it feels like to be turned on without necessarily having to do something with it, to notice what you're a no to, all these kinds of things, which a lot of people think they would come in, they'd think, well, I have a problem with sex. But really, the problem was very often more about, I'm having trouble relaxing in my skin. I'm having trouble knowing what I want. I'm having trouble articulating what I want. I'm having trouble saying no to what I don't want.
Mm-hmm.
And those are much more basic skills, but they show up sexually. And so you think, oh, my problems with sex, but very often it was these more basic skills that were hard for people. And so that's mostly what we worked with. And the wheel of consent grew out of that, because at one of those workshops I went to over the years, we played a game called the 3-minute game. It was developed by a man named Harry Faddis. It's a 3-minute game. And the 3-minute game is two people, two questions. You take turns asking each other these two questions. And the two questions are, what do you want me to do to you for 3 minutes?
Mm.
I can think of some fun things that you might want to do to me for 3 minutes. And what do you want to do to me for 3 minutes? So I'm doing to you or you're doing to me. And it's either I'm doing what you want or I'm doing what I want. And that turned out to be really interesting, that distinction.
Yeah.
Either I'm doing what you want or I'm doing what I want. What's the difference? What's it feel like? And likewise, when you were asking the questions, you're doing to me what you want, or you're doing to me what I want. And again, it's quite a difference. So the wheel of consent just draws out those four things.
4 quadrants, right?
Yeah, and it comes out in quadrants.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's really simple. Who's doing and who's it for?
Yeah.
Symmetry is now offering ketamine services. To find out more, go to simcounseling.com/ketamine-services.
Well, I love that. And going back to what you said earlier, so this concept, and you write about this in the first chapter of your book, is kind of this idea that you belong to yourself, and how
Mm-hmm.
mind altering that is. And it
Yeah,
is amazing how mind altering that is.
yeah. When it hit me, I thought, well, what was I thinking before?
Yeah,
So,
I work with a
yeah.
lot of folks around religious trauma. I work with a lot of folks that come from, maybe more traditional or conservative backgrounds or
Hmm.
cultures, the Hispanic population that, we're all talking about this. And in my group that I run, Reclaiming Female Sexuality, it's kind of like we realize, no, our bodies and our sexuality didn't belong to us. They belong to our parents.
Yeah,
They
right.
belong to our God, right? They
Yeah,
belong to our church leaders who got to ask us
yeah.
questions about our sexuality, that may or may not have been any of their business, right? It
Yes,
belongs
exactly.
to, yeah, this idea that it belongs to a future partner or to a partner who's
Hmm.
coming along. And we talk about all the songs that say, I belong to you or you belong to me. That sounds so
Oh, yeah,
romantic. And it's not
yeah,
very romantic
yeah,
after all when you start really
yeah,
thinking about what those things mean, right?
yeah, yeah,
So this
yeah.
concept that I belong to myself. And then you also, I mean, you talked about like thinking about even when you were little, like this stuff starts happening when we're little.
Oh,
Kind
sure.
of like your message that this isn't really about sex. It's like,
Yeah,
do I hug grandma and grandpa? Do I have to go to family
yeah.
dinner? Do I have to go to
Right,
school?
right.
Right? Like we have to do
Yeah.
all these things, whether we want to or not. Our
Yes.
consent isn't really very much considered.
Yeah. 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 And it's also true, or part of that is true in that we get touched in ways that we don't want and we don't like, and we can't, and we're powerless to stop. And this happens to everyone, and it happens before you can talk, before you learn to talk. So that it's pre-verbal, it's very deep in the psyche, it's very deep in the body. And we come out of that sort of believing that touch is that thing that happens to us, whether we want it or not. And we have to figure out somehow how to deal with it.
Mhm.
And if you're lucky, you have an opportunity to learn that you do, in fact, have a choice. But not everyone actually learns that. And as you say, those messages are coming in constantly. And so you grow up, maybe you get married or maybe you don't or whatever, but become sexually active with other people. And then that just sort of comes up again like, oh, this thing is happening to me now, and I'm supposed to like it somehow, even if I don't actually like it. And you start thinking, well, what's wrong with me? I'm supposed to like this, but I don't like this. Must be something wrong with me.
Mhm.
When actually the question to ask is not, why can't I like this thing? A more useful question is, what is it that I actually want? What is it that actually sounds interesting? What is it that actually sounds wonderful right now? But most people don't ask themselves that question because we're caught back in this, well, it's happening to me, so I guess I just have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a tragic phenomenon. Yeah. And I've seen it across all genders. It's not specific to any one gender. And it's pretty endemic for women, I think.
Mhm. Mhm.
If you were raised as a girl, then it's very likely gonna be there. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Because I don't think that sexuality is really taught in female centric ways.
Mm,
And especially like in a lot of the conservative religions that I work with, there's
hmm.
an actually explicit, statement that there's a
Hmm.
duty there. There's like a
Hmm.
duty to take care of your husband. And oftentimes there's these sexual kind of innuendos that go along with
Hmm.
that it's your
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you run the risk of infidelity or pornography
Yeah.
or whatever it
Yeah.
is, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Yeah.
threaten your relationship. So
Yeah.
anytime you have those kinds of motivations, that's not really at any base asking yourself
Yeah.
what you want. It's kind of like, what am I
Yeah.
trying to avoid? Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So your whole premise is really based on, I think, pleasure and consent, right? And
Hmm.
so really tuning into what actually feels good, whether I'm giving or whether I'm receiving, does
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
feel good, right? And
Hmm.
I think people can think of the concept of giving a gift And most
Mm-hmm.
of us probably find pleasure in gifting a gift to
Mm-hmm.
somebody,
Sure. Yeah.
as well as receiving a gift, right? That has hopefully pleasure associated with too. And then
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
consent piece is like, wait, what may or may not be happening? What are we agreeing
Mm-hmm.
should or should
Mm-hmm.
not be happening? And then
Yeah.
also this kind of agreement, which is a little bit more than just a yes or no, like an understanding of who is it for.
Yeah.
You're kind of
Yeah.
like, you're kind of going a little deeper in kind of
Yeah.
consent language than
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
want to or not, do I not want to?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. The consent, of course, is a big word nowadays.
Mm-hmm,
Thankfully, it's
mm-hmm,
certainly better than not having it talked about.
mm-hmm,
And after I'd been teaching this stuff for 10 or 15 years, I thought, I should look it up in the dictionary. And I did. And I was kind of surprised because I had been thinking of consent as we come to an agreement. But really, the dictionary says consent means basically saying yes.
mm-hmm,
I consent to XYZ, means I say yes to XYZ. So if you're saying yes to XYZ, it means someone else has asked for XYZ, not you.
mm-hmm,
So we've built this idea of consent as getting consent or giving consent means somebody's trying to get somebody else to say yes. And it creates what we sometimes refer to as the gatekeeper model of consent, which is someone's holding the gate and they're either open or closed, so you can get in or not. And it's commonly used in the social services work, and it's used in a lot of places. But in an intimate relationship, it's often one person feels like, oh, that person typically in a heterosexual relationship, it's typically that the woman has the sex and the man wants to get the sex from the woman. And so he has to convince her to open the gate so he can get the sex from her, which is problematic for many reasons. Um, but in that kind of 1950s model, you're trying to get a yes out of the other person. Well,
mm-hmm,
then the other person then feels this pressure, like I'm supposed to say yes because if I don't, and blah, 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 blah. So it's better than nothing, but it's sure not really very inspiring.
mm-hmm,
And how I am using, and many other people are using the word consent nowadays is more of coming to an agreement together.
mm-hmm,
This is what sounds fun to me. What sounds fun to you? Oh, this sounds fun to me. Well, let's try this, and then let's don't do this, but let's explore this. And then there's a lot more fun to be had by
mm-hmm.
everybody.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
mutual interest, mutual conversation,
yeah, yeah,
mutual like
yeah,
buy-in,
yeah,
um, not just one person trying to get something from another
yeah.
person type of.
Right, right. I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes that's appropriate. May I have a cookie from the cookie jar? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's a gatekeeper. But so there are times when it's appropriate, but it's not, if that's your go-to for sex, you're missing out on a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's start with you kind of quickly review what you call the old model, um,
Mm-hmm.
and of kind of how people are thinking about this, doing, giving, these words that
Mm-hmm.
we, kind of the whole give and receive type of
Mm-hmm.
ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you explain kind of the old model of thinking about this versus what you're going to teach us with the wheel of consent model?
Um, well, it in the easiest way to describe it is to talk about the word receive, because the word receive we use in a lot of different ways. One way we use it means basically something is coming towards me and it arrives at me. I can receive a package in the mail.
Mm-hmm.
I can receive a compliment.
Mm-hmm.
I can receive a pass to the 20-yard line. It just means it's coming, it arrives.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what receive means. Or I can receive a massage. So that's one use. And one of the things that you might receive is a gift from somebody. So you might want it. And you could also receive something you don't want. You could receive a punch in the jaw. You could receive an insult. So this word means that something arrives. I might or might not actually want it.
Mm-hmm.
So it might or might not actually be a gift.
Right.
So that's one use of the word. Then we have another use of the word, which means that I am receiving a gift, but this is where it gets tricky. But the gift that I want to receive is not something you're handing over to me. It's something that I want to do to you. Maybe I want to put my hand up your shirt. Well, that's receiving a gift, a very real gift, but the action is going from me to you, but
Mm-hmm.
the gift is going from you to me. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's it kind of throws a ratchet in what you're thinking about receiving. But many people use the word receive to mean they're being touched.
Only the passive approach,
Only the passive.
right?
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
happening to me.
Yeah. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're allowing me to put my hand up your shirt or feel you up or play with your hair, or then I'm the one who's doing, but you're the one who's giving the gift. So I'm receiving the gift, but I'm doing the action. So so I started looking at this and saying, wait a minute, this we need to use a different word here.
Yeah.
So I use receive to mean which way the gift is going. I
Okay.
don't use the word receive to refer to who's doing, because sometimes those are happening together, sometimes they're not.
Okay. So
Um,
you
so, so
could
it
be
doesn't mean that you have to use it that way. It's like this
yeah.
is the way that I use it in what we're talking about. Yeah,
So
yeah.
basically you're saying you can be a receiver, a passive receiver, like receiving a massage. You can
Hmm.
be an active receiver that
Yeah,
you're the one giving the massage because it
yeah,
helps you feel yummy to give
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Although I would say if it's a massage, it's by definition for you.
Mm.
So I would say if I'm feeling you up,
Okay. I like
then
it.
it's for me.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And
Okay.
that's a very different experience.
Yeah.
Giving you a massage is one thing, feeling you up, that's a very different thing.
Yeah.
And that's when it's clear that, oh, this actually is for me. I want to feel the curls in your hair.
Hmm.
That's for me. I
Hmm.
want to feel the shape of your face, or maybe I want to hold your hand and receive from some comfort from that,
Hmm.
that I'm doing that because I want to do it.
Yeah.
It's not about you. You probably enjoy it, which is lovely, but it's not really about you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I realize I need to clarify one thing, sort of back up a little bit. The wheel of consent is a practice in taking, receiving, giving apart, so that it's a practice in taking turns.
Hmm.
You don't want to spend your whole life taking turns. I don't think. I sure don't.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that you should be doing this all the time. Lord, no. It's a practice in taking, receiving, and giving apart, taking turns essentially, so that when it's my turn to receive, it's all about what I want. I respect your boundaries, of course, but it's about me. And when it's my turn to give and it's about you, then we're going with what you want. Again, I'm respecting my own boundaries. I'm not doing something that I don't want to do. But we're focusing on your enjoyment.
Hmm.
And what happens when you do that is really interesting. Because for one thing, you find out what receiving a gift really is.
Mm.
That breaks your heart right open. And it will challenge you. It will challenge, do I deserve this? Am I guilty? I'm too selfish for wanting this. blah, 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 blah. All this stuff will come up. And in the practice and in the workshops and stuff that we do, that always comes up
Mm-hmm.
because so many of us have been taught that it's more blessed to give than receive. And it may be kind of dangerous to receive because it's a vulnerable place and, shame on you for wanting something and you're not supposed to want anything and all those things will kind of bubble up as you experiment here. So it's a practice and taking them apart. You don't want to live that way all the time, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love that. And I think that's actually really useful to step into those kinds of
Hmm.
spaces intentionally to say what
Hmm.
this is about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So old model, just to kind of recap, is like if you're receiving, that's been conflated with being done to.
Done to. Yes.
And if you're giving, that's conflated with your doing. And
Yes.
so what you're doing with the wheel of consent, which now we're going to go more deeply into, is we might put up like a visual for people to
Yeah.
look at on
Yeah.
the website, and I'm going to refer to your website all
Yeah.
at the end too. But if you can visualize it, if you're just hearing this, it's basically a circle where there's four different quadrants. So I'm going to let you
Hmm.
explain kind of how you think about these four different
Hmm.
quadrants and how
Hmm.
they go a little bit deeper than just doing.
Yeah. 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 Well, there's four quadrants. Either when I'm doing what I want to do, I call that the take quadrant. Take is a problematic word because to some people it means steal, but it's not stealing. You're actually receiving a gift. So I'm in the take quadrant. I'm doing something to you that I want to do. I'm playing with your hair, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm doing something I want to do, and you are in the opposite quadrant, in the allow quadrant, because you are allowing me to do this thing that I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the dynamic that happens between those two quadrants. Or I may be doing something that you want me to do. You have said, will you scratch my back? Will you braid my hair? Will you give me a foot rub? Will you bring me a cup of tea? So I'm taking action for your benefit. That's a good thing to know how to do. I'm taking action for your benefit, and I call that quadrant serve. It's what most people would call give, but allowing is also a type of giving. Yeah, when I'm allowing you to do what you want, I'm giving you my body or
Mm-hmm.
some part of it that we've agreed on. So that quadrant that some people call give needed a new name. So it's
Mm-hmm.
called serve, and it's taking action for the benefit of somebody else. And then if I'm in serve, you're going to be in this opposite quadrant called accept, which
Mm-hmm.
means you get the thing done that you wanted to have done to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So in the doing half of the wheel, I'm either doing what I want or I'm doing what you want. Big difference. Big difference.
Yeah.
A lot of people struggle with doing what they themselves want because it feels foreign. It's like
Selfish.
it's kind of almost hard to even find in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And in the book, I explain how to do that. And there's free videos online as well. It's on YouTube. Look it up. So for a lot of people, that's difficult to kind of find or let it click. But
Mm-hmm.
the quadrants are I'm in taking, which means I'm doing what I want, or I'm in serve, which I'm doing what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we're taking turns here.
Yeah.
And in the done to half, either you're doing what I want or you're doing what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Again, a very big and significant difference.
Yeah.
Um,
Is the allowing or the
yeah,
accepting.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And what I
Yeah.
can say is just it's a lot of fun. It's
Yeah.
just fun.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
and then within the context, the overall circle of pleasure and consent, right? Because I can
Hmm.
think of like one of the biggest things that comes into my office is a history of like duty or obligatory sex, right?
Hmm.
So this is where
Yeah,
somebody is allowing
yeah,
without pleasure.
yeah. Without, yeah. Yeah.
without pleasure. So that has to be
Yeah.
a huge component that it actually
Yeah.
can be pleasurable to allow.
Yes, sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it can be. In
Right.
fact, it's really fun when it gives you the opportunity to surrender to the
Mhm.
other person's desire, which is very fun
Mhm.
if that's what you want to play with. Yeah.
Right. If
Yeah.
that's what you want to play with.
If
Yeah.
you just feel like, oh my God, here we go again, and they don't know what they're doing anyway, and I'm not really into it, and no one's asked me what I want,
Mhm.
it's not going to be fun.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And those are the skills. Just what you just
Hmm.
said.
Hmm.
Just that one
Yeah.
sentence is
Yeah.
where we lack skills profoundly,
Yeah.
right?
Nobody asked me what I want. Yeah. 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 So
Right. This
that's really true.
could be fun. This might be
Well,
fun, but
and then somebody does ask us, and what do we? I don't know
yeah,
because we
right.
haven't had the opportunity.
Because we
Yeah.
can't take up space.
Because we can't take up space. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It's
Yeah.
interesting how you mentioned the word take has like this already
Hmm.
negative connotation, like
Yeah.
taking
Yeah.
is bad somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I talk with a lot of women in particular about like receiving oral sex, cunnilingus,
Yeah.
and how they'll often be like, oh, I don't know, that takes up too much time. And I don't know if I smell right, or I don't, and
Yeah.
the whole thing, everything that they're
Yeah.
saying has nothing to do with them and whether or not they actually
Hmm.
enjoy it.
Hmm.
It just has to do with what they're assuming maybe their
Yeah.
partner may or may not enjoy
Yeah. Yeah.
about that act. Yeah.
Yeah. And their partner may or may not enjoy it.
Yes. Right.
There's no,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
no
sure, for
guarantee.
sure. And yet there
Yeah.
are many times I talk to a partner who's like, I love it. I would do it all day long. But
Yeah.
there's still this hesitation to take
Sure.
something that
Yeah.
I'm offering.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like any action, you can do that action for your own enjoyment, or you can do it for the other person's enjoyment. And it may look very similar,
Mm-hmm.
or it may be different. Like how she likes cunnilingus may be different than how he likes it,
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
well, this is really a great segue into kind of my favorite topic, which is the 3-minute game, which is what we started with.
Yes.
And this is something that any couple can do. It uh, and I recommend that you do it at least 20 or 30 times before you ever get sexy with it. That just, clothed, start in the living room so there's not a bunch of sexual expectations on it. And that is going back to that original game, two people, two questions. What do you want me to do to you for 3 minutes? And what do you want to do to me for 3 minutes? Or that's one version. Another version is, how do you want me to touch you for 3 minutes? Or how do you want to touch me for 3 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
And I ask you, for example, how do you want me to touch you for 3 minutes? And then for you, it's an opportunity to, oh, gee, it's my turn. What would I want? Oh, maybe I'd want a head scratch. Oh, maybe I want a shoulder rub. Oh, maybe I want you to squeeze my rib. It gives you an opportunity to notice that there is, in fact, something that sounds great to you.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be sexy. In fact, you learn better if it's not sexy.
Yeah.
But oh, it's an opportunity for you to notice what you want. And then you ask for that. Well, will you scratch my head? And then it's an opportunity for me to notice, oh, is that a gift that I can give with a full heart?
Mm-hmm.
It may or may not be outrageously fun for me, but this is for you. So is it something that I'm happy and willing to do?
Mm-hmm.
And then we maybe have a little conversation about, let's see, do you want to lie down this way? Do you want to sit up? Do you want to lie down? You want to put your head in my lap? Then we have a conversation about how we want to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we set the timer for 3 minutes. And we do that for 3 minutes. And then we sit up and you say thank you and I say you're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
And then we switch. Now it's your turn to ask me, how do you want me to touch you? Oh, now I get to notice, what do I want? Oh, would you rub my feet? And then you get to say, oh, let's see, am I willing to do that? Yeah, I can do that. Only if you keep your socks on. Okay, that works.
Mhm.
So then we get set up, put my feet in your lap or whatever, and set the timer, 3 minutes. When we're finished, I say thank you, you say you're welcome. And then the other question, same thing, the other question, how do you want to touch me? Oh, that's a very different question.
Mhm.
Like it's basically, how do you want to feel me up?
Mhm.
So maybe I want to squeeze your thighs. Maybe I want to play with your hair. Maybe I want to sniff the back of your neck. Maybe I want to feel your bottom, whatever. What do my hands want to get to on you?
Mhm.
And then, so I ask you, how do you want to touch me? You say, well, may I play with your hair? And is that a gift that I can give with a full heart? Yeah, I'm happy to let you do that, but don't pull it. Okay, so then we set the timer for 3 minutes, and then you say thank you because I was giving you the gift. So
Mm.
you say thank you, I say you're welcome, and then we switch.
Yeah.
So what this does is really quite amazing, especially if you leave sex off of it. If you okay, we're not going to go for sex in this time. What happens is that you discover there's lots of ways to enjoy each other's bodies that don't have to do with sex. My
Mm.
God, that's a huge, that's
That-
a huge aha for many people. Yeah. And you expand your repertoire of
Mhm.
what is even exists in the world, and you develop your ability and your confidence to be able to communicate about it. You
Mhm.
get really good at asking for what you want
Mm.
because you had this low stakes practice,
Yeah.
and you have some fun, which is a big step for a lot of people.
Yeah.
For many people, very sadly, the only touch they get is when sex is happening, and that's a that's a tragic loss in my book. There are lots of ways to touch and enjoy each other that are not about sex, but
Yeah.
many people just don't know what to do. And so the three
Yeah.
minute game, 3 minute game solves pretty much everything, actually. It's
I love it.
yeah,
And I love how
yeah.
you really walked us through that because I think and I love how you role modeled not only the question
Hmm.
because you don't know what they're going to say, right? So
Hmm.
how do you want me to touch you?
Right.
And but then when they say it back, that then there's that pause moment. Like, is that something I can do?
Yes. Yes.
So it's not just a given that just because I ask,
Right.
then you're going to get
Yeah.
whatever you want,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's a really important piece
Hmm. I
that
love
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, that's really good role. And well, and then to your other point, I agree with you. I think most of us are touch starved. I think in particular,
Hmm.
anybody who's been socialized as a man or growing up
Hmm.
identifies as a male is touch starved because
Hmm. Very
there's
often.
I
Yeah.
think as women, we oftentimes are able to touch each other in more
Yeah.
culturally appropriate ways than men are
Yeah.
allowed to in our culture. And so, and then on top of that, I think because people are struggling, many couples are struggling with libido differences,
Hmm.
erotic differences.
Hmm.
There's a tension there that they're
Yeah.
holding,
Yeah.
and therefore they avoid touch because
Yeah.
touch,
Right.
if I touch you, that might mean that
Yeah.
you think I want to have sex with you, or if I
Yeah.
touch you, you may think that I'm pressuring you to have sex with me,
Yeah.
right? Or and
Yeah. Yeah.
so there's just this incapacity to think about touch in a non-sexual
Yeah.
way when there's those
Yeah.
wounds. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And touch and sex are entirely different needs.
Yes.
We humans have a need for touch that we never outgrow. It is not about sex. And we also have a need for not for sex as an activity, but sexual expression, for being who we truly are as a sexual being. And
Hmm.
those are two different needs. You can't meet one with the other.
Mm.
Um, Yeah,
So,
touch is really, really a sadly lacking. And as you noted, you may be afraid to touch because, oh, now they're going to want sex. Yeah,
mm-hmm,
yeah,
mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very sad for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to, I know we won't have time to go through all of these because then,
Okay.
like, everybody get the book because this is a great book. So
There's
whatever we
also
don't,
a lot of stuff on YouTube. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So, but I want to talk about some of the things that you said about the quadrants, right? So you said each one is enjoyable in its own right. So I
Mm-hmm,
want you to kind of talk about why there might be pleasure in each of these, especially if people are like, there's not pleasure in taking, that's selfish, or
mm-hmm,
there's not
mm-hmm,
pleasure in allowing, because what if I don't
mm-hmm.
want to do that thing and
Yeah,
I'm not being
right,
authentic to myself? But then you say if
right.
it's not enjoyable, you're not in the quadrant. So
Yeah,
that's what I mean by pleasure. So kind of
yeah,
dive into
yeah.
that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I would distinguish, I mean, for many people, the word pleasure implies that it's sexual. So we're
Mm,
using a much broader definition. You can have pleasure looking at a sunset, I mean, I'm using a broad definition of pleasure. In the taking quadrant, I am touching you the way I want for my enjoyment. So my hands are, I love the feel of your hair. I love the feel of your calves. And that's the pleasure of, oh yeah, you are giving me this gift of access to your body. That is a huge gift. And so it's filling my heart, it's filling my hands. There's often pleasure in the serve quadrant. Now in the serve quadrant, I'm doing what you want. I'm giving you the massage, I'm giving you the foot rub, and it's very often enjoyable for me, not always. I may not really like your feet, but I'm giving you the foot rub because you wanted it. So there's often some enjoyment there, and there's also a certain kind of satisfaction of because I care for you.
mhm,
I want to do something that's yummy to you. And so there's a kind of that's a different kind of pleasure than just getting my hands on you for my own enjoyment.
mhm,
There's also some pleasure in seeing you in pleasure, of course.
mhm,
I think most of us know that. And in the accept quadrant, now I have asked you to rub my back or whatever, and so you're doing what I want you to do. Well, that's going to be pleasurable.
mhm,
If it's not pleasurable, why the heck are we doing it? Because
mhm,
it's for me. Why would I put up with something that doesn't feel great? I
mhm.
need to say, oh, will you go a little deeper there? Or actually, that doesn't work. Let's do this instead. Will you rub here? Because it's for me. So
Mhm.
it's going to be inherently pleasurable. If it's not pleasurable, then change what you're doing till it
Yeah.
is.
And don't you
And
think
then,
that what interferes with that? What interferes with people being able to, like, why would somebody, if this back rub is for me, why would somebody put up with unpleasurable back rubs?
oh, loads of reasons. some of which some of which
A
you've
loaded
named it.
question.
Okay. Yeah, what a great segue there. Because I've been taught that I'm not supposed to want anything. I'm supposed to keep you happy. I don't want to make you think that you're not doing it right. It's
Mhm.
embarrassing. I feel guilty if I ask you to do something different, all this stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
which of course is just bullshit, but we have it
Yeah.
totally.
It's
Yeah,
that
yeah.
noise, right? That noise.
Well,
When
it's
you
that
think about
noise.
it, it's like that inside
Yeah,
noise.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. And it can actually be very difficult. It can be, I mean, we're kind of laughing at it, but it can be very difficult. Yeah, yeah. So then the fourth quadrant, allow, that's where you're touching me the way you want, and I'm giving you the gift of access to my body. It might or might not feel pleasant to me physically. Quite often it does because your hands are relaxed. But there again, there's a certain pleasure in giving a gift to someone that you care about.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's quite wonderful, sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
But each quadrant has some of its own kind of different kind of satisfaction in it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
right. And that's,
Yeah.
I think, the piece I hope people take away the most is they're thinking about these four quadrants. It's like, not only am I offering it or taking
Mm-hmm.
it, but is there some level of, neutrality to positivity about it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because the minute you go into
Yeah.
negativity, that's where it needs to stop. You're no longer in the quadrant, like you said. You're not in
Yes.
the quadrant,
Yeah. Yeah.
right, if it's
Yeah.
not enjoyable. So,
Yeah. It's something else. And
yeah,
we all know how to do the something else.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. The next two are kind of they kind of may go together. You say each quadrant will challenge you in different ways, and each one will teach you something different about yourself. So do you want to
Yeah.
talk
Ooh,
about
yeah. Well, in the take quadrant, which is the hardest one for almost everybody, what you learn is that well, it's challenging because it goes against it goes against your habits, it goes against how you've been taught. It may be kind of hard to find, like, I don't know, get this, until it clicks. And what often is emotionally challenging with the taking quadrant is, oh shit, I'm guilty. I shouldn't be this selfish. What's wrong with me?
it?
I shouldn't be, I should never do anything for my own enjoyment. I
Mm-hmm.
should only do things for other people's enjoyment. I feel guilty. I don't want to use my partner.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all these things will tend to come up and they'll challenge you. And what you learn in the taking quadrant is that it actually is a good thing to do something for your own enjoyment if you are very clear with the other people that they are happy to go along with it.
Yeah.
So you get very good at asking for consent and having that consent conversation. You get very good at respecting their limits. If they say, yes, you can play with my leg, but only up to here, you get very good at going only up to here and no further.
Yeah.
Um, and so you get good at respecting other people's boundaries. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that I would encourage everybody to think about, each quadrant, especially if you get the book or you look at the
Mm-hmm.
online resources and really think about what is it about this that's either easy or
Mm-hmm.
hard for me. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's not to look at them. I mean, I think,
Yeah.
you said like we tend to be better at some and better than others.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also okay to have favorites, right? So
Oh
like
yeah.
I'm a good server. I'm really good at
Mm-hmm.
serving
Yeah.
and I actually enjoy it. Like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
gives me
Most people do.
pleasure to know that I'm giving you pleasure,
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
that.
Most people do.
I stink more at the taking, like you're
Yes.
saying.
Most people do.
Yeah, as a good Mormon woman, I
Yeah.
I struggle with the taking. But even thinking about those things, even the easier one for me, if I really consider it, I do learn a lot about myself as I
Mm-hmm.
consider even what's easy for me, not just what's hard.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. And in the serving quadrant, your challenge is very often, oh, I'm not creating their pleasure or their experience. I'm contributing to their opportunity to enjoy it,
Mhm.
but I'm not the one who's pulling the magic strings and making them feel good.
Yeah.
That's yeah, that's a pretty arrogant approach and also one that you can't win
Mhm.
because nobody has the power to create pleasure in another person. Pleasure is a physiological process in your own body.
Mhm.
I can contribute to the likelihood that you will experience pleasure,
Mm.
but I can't turn you on and off like a switch. You are not a robot.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think a lot of us, if we could understand that our partner's not a robot that's we're going to turn on and off with switches,
Mhm.
that we're real human beings and different factors come into what pleasure I will experience in any given moment. A lot of factors. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really,
So, yeah.
yeah.
So in serving, you get a little humility,
Mm-hmm.
and you learn to um, abide by your own boundaries. Like I'm happy to do this for you, but I can't do this for you. And that's an important skill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and that just hits right at the core too of a lot of the reasons why we all get hurt feelings. And
Hmm.
I tease us all that we all have kind of fairly sexually fragile egos. And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I think of the upbringing that most of us have had, we just don't have a
Yeah.
lot of skill set to
Yeah.
have resilient sexual egos. But I think it's that idea of like, well, why don't you have an erection? Aren't I sexy enough?
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
Why don't you?
Yeah.
Why didn't you have an orgasm? Didn't I do enough for you? And
Hmm.
so again, people are placing on themselves, like you're saying,
Hmm.
inappropriate responsibility
Oh,
for
yeah.
another person's
Yeah. Yeah.
reactions. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, last one before we run out of time. So you said that, and I think these two also kind of go together. So you said that each quadrant tends to evoke a particular erotic element, and
Hmm.
each one opens a certain kind of freedom.
Hmm. You're asking all the good questions.
I love having this conversation with you.
Yeah, each one, what I say, a particular kind of erotic.
Evokes a
Well,
erotic
yeah,
element. Hmm.
yeah. In the accepting quadrant where you're doing what I want, it's an opportunity for me to put all my attention on my skin and my sensation and see what comes up. I may not really be paying much attention to you, but I'm putting all my attention on my sensation and what comes up for me. And it's an opportunity. It's basically it erotically would be an erotic massage, and it's an opportunity for me to see what's inside of me. What are my feelings when this is happening? Um, and of course, an erotic massage can be very sexy to receive. It can also be pretty enjoyable to give.
Hmm.
Um, in allowing where you're doing to me what you want and I'm gifting you my body, access to my body, it's an opportunity, if I'm clear about what my boundaries are, it's an opportunity to surrender, which is very delicious. And it's kind of like that take aloud dynamic is that kind of sexy ravishment that, oh, I want you, I'm going to take you, within the agreements of this is welcome, this is not. So it's not assault,
Right,
but
right.
it can be erotically very charged because I want you and I want to do this to you and I want to do this to you, and it can be very charged. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And that experience of surrender is one of those things that people think they're supposed to be able to do, but often don't know how. And the trick is that if you want to learn to surrender, you first have to gain the skill to set up your boundaries and speak up for them if needed,
Mm.
because it could happen that somebody forgets or steps over what you've agreed to give them, and you need to be able to say, whoop, that's not my leg,
Mhm.
because if you don't have the skill to speak up for yourself or to say up to here and no farther, then you can't afford to surrender.
Yeah.
You can't afford it
Mhm.
because something's going to happen that you don't want to happen.
Yeah.
And so people think, well, I should just be able to surrender more. And it's like, no, you learn to set your boundaries and speak up for them as needed. Then the surrender becomes easy and fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the other way around.
And
Yeah.
this, I mean, yeah, if we could talk a full hour just about what you just
Yes, we.
know, that is really,
Yeah.
really profound, especially coming from a culture where we've been taught really poor boundaries, right? So
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
speak for kind of Mormon culture, but I've worked with a lot of evangelicals and Catholics and Jehovah's
Yeah.
Witnesses. And
Yeah.
really the boundaries, like you said at the beginning, were I just need to be here. They expect me to be here. I'm supposed to be
Yeah.
here. I'm supposed to
Yeah.
be the
Yeah.
good girl or the good boy or the dutiful wife or the
Mm-hmm.
presiding husband or so you have all
Mm-hmm.
these roles and nobody's really gotten the permission to say, hey, you can only go up until here.
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
in
Exactly.
any relationship, right? And so we're in
Yeah.
fact we're kind of taught that if you do that, that's mean or
Yeah.
that's not
Right.
loyal or that's
Yeah.
not, that's
Yeah. Not generous enough.
inappropriate, that you're not doing what God would
Mm.
want you to do or whatever
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is. Because pretty much what grandma wants you to do and what God wants you to do is probably the same thing. Right? So it's kind of
Yeah. Pretty.
so you're taught from a pretty early age. I don't have
Right.
that right. And for you to really conceptualize that conflict, that the only way you can surrender is to be highly boundaried, almost seems like a
Yes.
contradiction, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It does. It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. And
And
I
this goes back to playing the 3 minute game. Playing the
yeah,
3 minute game is where you learn these skills
yes.
because your partner asks you what you want, and nothing is going to happen until you ask for it.
Yeah.
Nothing is going to happen until you ask for it. Oh, that's an option. And then you start asking for things. And yeah, that's the 3 minute game that where the skills are developed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I
Yeah.
love that. That goes right along with freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
you want freedom to be and to love and to offer and to give and
Yeah.
all these things. It has to
Yeah.
come from a sense of basic safety and trust
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we can tell each other these things. That
Yeah.
I can trust that
Yeah.
you're going to tell me if I'm doing something that doesn't work for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can trust that you'll tell me the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, that is a lifelong journey, as far
Mhm.
as I can tell. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not easy growing up in any culture that makes these assumptions about what you're supposed to want, what you're not supposed to want, what you're supposed to give, what you're not supposed to give, what blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Yeah.
Well, tell us. I mean, first of all, I thank you for coming.
You're so welcome.
Excellent. I might hit you up to come back if possible. So you'll have to
Sure.
decide whether or not you want to offer
Yeah.
that to me, whether or not you want
Yeah.
to allow me more of your time. and but tell us more like where can we get a hold of you? How can people, what's your website?
Hmm.
Just give us your
Great.
information as far as
Yep. BettyMartin.org is my website. I'm no longer taking private clients, but I do offer supervision for other practitioners. And these days, I mostly teach workshops, trainings for hands-on practitioners. So we have body workers, sex workers, we have therapists, physicians, physical therapists, all kinds of and coaches. So all kinds of people come to the workshop to learn how to use the wheel of consent in their professional practice. There's also dozens of people around the world teaching wheel of consent workshops that we have trained them for. And you can find those at schoolofconsent.org, schoolofconsent.org. And there's workshops all over the world for just regular people show up. Um, and look me up on YouTube. A lot of this stuff is free. And on the Betty Martin site, there's 8 hours of free video that takes you through the whole thing.
Okay. That's
Um, and
amazing.
and of course, there's the book. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I've got Monica saying, please come back. This was so insightful. Thank you.
I will do that. Yeah,
Well, and
great.
thank you so much I mean, I know what it's like to be a content creator and I know what it's like to put 8 hours of your content up for free. And I'm guessing that has to do with your values of wanting to reach people who maybe don't always have the funds or
Yeah.
means to
Yeah.
access things like workshops and, going to more expensive types of outlets. So thank you
Yeah.
for
You
offering.
are so welcome.
Yeah,
You're so
that's
welcome. It's that little page has taken off around the world, and we're trying to keep up with it.
yeah, I
Yeah.
can imagine.
Yeah.
Well, this is such an important
Yeah.
topic. And
Yeah.
so much. I think we're both in the business of pleasure and trying to help people access more pleasure in
Yes.
their lives and in their relationships. So this is super important work. Thank you so much, Dr. Martin.
You are so very welcome. We'll
All
see
right.
you.
You have a good rest of your week.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes are by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
There is a place where time slows to nature's pace, and there is space there to find yourself in her embrace. Some places should be left alone. Now dish ki say the now, so we can always go to the homeland of the heart. 10,000 years of our human history etched on her canyon halls, alongside Earth's mysteries. Some places should be left alone. Now dish ki say the navu, so we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart. Deep in our cities, we sleep without her stars, yet still her presence sustains us from afar. Some places should be left alone. Now dish ki say the navu, so we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland